Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports, and in today's video we're going to be taking a closer look at the NFL trade deadline, talking about some really key players to watch, some key teams that might be active throughout the trade deadline. Remember, the NFL trade deadline is November 2nd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, so 3 p.m. Central Time for those of you watching in Central Time across America. There is a lot to break down for potential moves that could happen and a bunch of different crazy things that we could see. There's going to be a lot of active teams making some trades, selling, buying, and everything in between. We're going to have a lot of action this year. I think this is going to be one of the best NFL trade deadlines in recent memory, honestly, because there's a lot of really, really good players that could be out on the market. We're going to talk about quite a few of them in today's video. Moving forward here into our jersey giveaway. Remember, we do have a Justin Fields jersey giveaway going on the channel right now. If you want to be entered for that, all you have to do is the three things here on the screen. Hit that subscribe button. Comment on this video. It could be anything. You could comment the word jersey giveaway. You could comment whatever you want about the video, and then also leave a like on the video. If you do those three things, it is an absolutely 100% free way to get entered for a jersey giveaway that you could, at the end of the day, walk away with this Justin Fields jersey. Super awesome, in my opinion. I think it's really, really good. Looks super, super nice in person. And those three things take less than 1 minute. So the amount of time I've been talking about it here in this video, you could have done all three of these things already and been entered. Make sure to do that. We want to see one of our lucky subscribers walk away with this awesome Justin Fields Chicago Bears jersey. So now let's go ahead and talk about some of the teams I expect to be active this year. There's 4 teams I really indicated as buyers, maybe a 5th team in here I could have included as well. But the top 4 I've identified are the Green Bay Packers, the Dallas Cowboys, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Los Angeles Chargers. I also think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers might be active for a member of the secondary, either a safety or a cornerback. I think that they could use a little bit of help on the back end of that defense yet, especially with some of the injuries that they've sustained this season. And then looking at some of the sellers as well, the Denver Broncos. I think they're the real headline team when it comes to sellers. I'm actually doing a Denver Broncos rebuild on the channel right now. We live streamed the first part of it yesterday. We're going to be looking to do that again at some point. Also looking at the Philadelphia Eagles. They are another team that we could see making a few moves this deadline. The Miami Dolphins have had a lot of rumors, especially at that quarterback position. We'll talk about them a little bit more specifically later on. The Houston Texans as well with Deshaun Watson. We're going to have a discussion on Deshaun, if he gets moved, if he doesn't. I actually don't have a slide for him, so we're going to talk about that when we get to Miami, because I think Miami is the lead candidate for a move for Deshaun Watson. And then also the Detroit Lions here. Another team I think could look at selling, probably not going to be as active as some of these other teams, but still going to maybe look around, see if they can make a move or two that'll help them kind of position themselves long-term for the future. Let's go ahead and now jump forward to some players to watch this trade deadline. I think this is really the most interesting part of the video, because we get to look at specific guys, where they could potentially land and end up. And I want to start here with Von Miller, the big-time superstar edge from the Denver Broncos. He's been there his whole career. He's a phenomenal edge pass rusher. I think he's best in a 3-4 system as an outside linebacker. And because of that, I identified some places where I think he'd be a phenomenal fit. The Green Bay Packers, Arizona Cardinals, Tennessee Titans, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are the top 4 fits, in my opinion. Arizona is a late emerger here for me, especially with the news that J.J. Watt's out for the season. I think that they're going to maybe get aggressive and look for another pass rusher across from Chandler Jones. They, of course, did lose to the Green Bay Packers Thursday night, so maybe they're like, hey, if we want to really win the NFC, make our way to the Super Bowl, maybe we have to go out and make a big-time move. The team that I see least likely on here, honestly, is probably Tampa Bay. I don't know if they're going to really go and pay for an edge, especially with what they have in Shaq Barrett and JPP. They also have Joe Tryon there as well, so they don't necessarily need to go get an edge. But I do think that they would have interest in Von Miller, just with how good of a pass rusher he is, still at the age of 32 years old. The Packers, I think, are the best fit here for Von Miller. They were very, very interested in grabbing J.J. Watt when he was a free agent. He opted to go to Arizona. And in turn now, I think that they need an edge rusher, especially with Darius Smith having an injury that he's been dealing with. They've got some pieces on that team. They've been a little beat up, and they're still playing great football. This is their year to win an NFL championship with Aaron Rodgers before he hits free agency. I think that this is the year they need to go hit the buy now, move on Von Miller. However, does he get traded? I honestly think he does not get traded. It's going to be very, very hard to find a team willing to give up the assets that Denver's looking for. And they're not going to end up trading him for something they view as least or below his trade value area. Of course, they're going to be really interested in trading him to the NFC. They don't want to see him in the AFC. So it makes Tennessee a little less likely. And with him going to the NFC, it just limits how many teams you're going to be able to contact, really, that are buy now teams. Of course, there are a lot of really good teams across the NFL and in the NFC that would be interested. However, are the Packers willing to give up, a day one pick, arguably, for a rental on Von Miller? Are they going to be able to give up an early day two pick for Von Miller? Are they going to be able to rationalize that type of rental for a guy who has, maybe 10 weeks of football with your organization? I'm not sure if a team's going to be willing to roll that risk on Von Miller. And I don't see the Denver Broncos trading him for less than a first or second round pick, honestly. They're going to look at Von Miller as a high-end player like he is. They're not going to just give him up for nothing. And it's tough because the edge position is so valuable in the NFL that players like Von Miller, they're so rare that they demand that high-level asset back. Think about when Dante Fowler got traded to the Los Angeles Rams quite a few years ago from the Jacksonville Jaguars with literally zero production throughout his NFL career. They still were able to recoup a fourth-round pick for him just because he was a former top 10 pick. Von Miller is a superstar with superstar production. They're going to want a high-end asset. I'm not sure if a team's willing to give that up. My guess right now, the Denver Broncos do not trade Von Miller. However, their trade talks with these teams do end up leading to something, because it leads us to Kyle Fuller, their cornerback there, who has not been getting a lot of snaps as of late. He's been kind of worked out of the cornerback room. Of course, they got Patrick Surtain there, Bradley Roby, also Bryce Callahan. They've got a lot of nice young pieces. Michael Ojemudia there as well, another long-term cornerback for them that they're looking at. And Kyle Fuller's going to get traded. I feel very, very confident that Kyle Fuller will not be on the Denver Broncos by week 9. And there's going to be some teams interested here. The Dallas Cowboys, I think, should be a team very, very intrigued by Kyle Fuller. He fits what they're trying to do. He can run that man-to-man scheme. Very, very talented man-to-man corner in my estimation. Also, the Los Angeles Rams, they don't have the salary cap space currently to bring in Kyle Fuller, so they'd have to finagle a little bit, work out a deal. But they did trade Kenny Young away this past week, of course, to the Denver Broncos, actually. So maybe they're looking for a way to open up some money elsewhere as well, to maybe make a deal for another top player. Kyle Fuller does make a lot of sense there. Then we have the Tennessee Titans here. This is what I was talking about with the Titans and Buccaneers, two teams that are interested in bringing in some cornerbacks, especially based off their health right now. Caleb Farley went out for the season for Tennessee. Tampa Bay, Richard Sherman's been hurt. Carlton Davis been hurt. They've had a ton of injuries in that cornerback room there in Tampa Bay. They need to find a way to bring someone in. And I also think the Green Bay Packers, I could have considered them on this list as well. All the teams here that I talked about being interested in Von Miller probably will be interested in Kyle Fuller as well. They're going to have some discussions about both of these players. Ultimately, I think a lot of these teams are going to say they're asking too much for Von Miller. We can't afford to give that up for someone who's not going to be here long term and is due a contract at the end of the season. In turn, they're going to go with Kyle Fuller, pay a little bit less for the rental, probably a 5th or 4th round pick at best would be my guess. And Kyle Fuller is going to end up playing for an NFC or AFC conference championship type of team. The Titans, very, very good. Need a cornerback, need a little bit of help on the offensive line, but then they're there. And then these 3 NFC teams in Dallas, LA, Tampa Bay, and even if we include Green Bay, the 4 of those, probably the 4 best teams in the NFC right now. So it's hard to see Kyle Fuller not end up on a contender after the trade deadline this year. Moving forward, we're going to talk about the Miami Dolphins here. They are a very intriguing team to me. They got some really, really good players and some young players as well that could be on the move. First, let's start with Devontae Parker here and actually Will Fuller, their wide receivers. I think that both of these guys are on the trade block. I think it's more likely that we see Will Fuller get moved than Devontae Parker. However, both very, very available in my estimation. There's a report coming out today that the Dolphins will listen to offers for their wide receivers. It's clear that Jalen Waddle's the wide receiver, one of the future there in Miami. Devontae Parker, Will Fuller just haven't had the seasons that I think many were expecting and hoping. Injuries have always been a concern for those two guys as well. I think Miami's ready to move on. I think we see both of them in trade discussions. I'm not sure if we see them actually get moved or not. Will Fuller to Green Bay, Devontae Parker maybe to Green Bay makes some sense. Green Bay has a lot of room to be active this year, especially with the pressure on that organization. Then we turn our eyes to Emmanuel Ogbah, a younger edge who has, had some nice production throughout his career so far, but has some upside as well. I think Miami looks to move on from Agba in a deal. Maybe the Cleveland Browns here are a team that get interested in Emmanuel Agba, possibly the Los Angeles Chargers as well. I know those are two AFC teams that Miami wouldn't be in love with sending Agba to, but at the end of the day, they don't really have much of a say in that. They're going to end up trading Agba to whatever team is giving them the best package, and I think it's very possibly the Chargers or the Browns in that. Now let's turn our attention to Tua Tagovailoa, the former Crimson Tide quarterback, tank for Tua type player, top 10 pick in the draft a few years back, just hasn't been that type of player. Now, part of the issue is they don't run the football very well at all in Miami. About 67% of their play calls this year have been designed to pass the football. That is a lot of pressure on a young quarterback when he's dropping back that many times a game to play such good games, such clean games, really assign blocking correctly, assign pass protection, and also really put the team on his back as a passer. That's really tough to do as a young player, and he just has struggled more than I think anyone was really expecting, especially with that hip injury. He just hasn't been the same player since he sustained that injury in college. And for Tua, I don't see him getting traded this year. I know Brian Flores recently said that Tua Tagovailoa is the quarterback for the Miami Dolphins for 2021. I don't necessarily believe Brian Flores fully, but at the end of the day, I think nothing gets done here because of some of the outlying conditions with Deshaun Watson. I think Deshaun Watson will be on the Houston Texans throughout the rest of this season. This is where we really get into the discussion on Deshaun. I want to know in the comment section right now, let me know, would you trade for Deshaun Watson right now if the package was 2 first-round picks and your starting quarterback? So, for example, if you're the Denver Broncos, you have to attach Teddy Bridgewater and or Drew Lock. If you're the Dolphins, you have to do 2 firsts and Tua Tagovailoa. Are you making that deal with the situation around Deshaun Watson? Are you willing to give up those level of assets for a player who has some really serious allegations against him right now? The NFL has said he would be cleared to play throughout the investigation, throughout some of the off-field stuff. But at the end of the day, you don't really know what that long-term situation looks like. I mean, if he gets convicted of something, it's going to be, a pretty messy situation. Do you really want to roll 2 first-round picks out? I think Deshaun Watson is on the Houston Texans for the rest of this season. Moving forward now, we're looking at some other wide receivers available, and we'll start here with the Houston Texans. Brandon Cooks has had a very good year, but was very critical of the Houston Texans when they traded Mark Ingram away with a tweet he put out on Twitter. Clearly was not happy about the Texans' decision to trade their starting running back Mark Ingram back to the New Orleans Saints for a 2024 7th-round pick. Then it kind of leaves Brandon Cooks in a tough situation because the Packers for sure going to be interested as well. I think there's some other teams out there too that will have some real interest in Brandon Cooks. There's a lot of teams in need of wide receivers, and that's really, really fortunate this year because there are so many good wide receivers on the trade block, and there's a bunch of different guys who can help in different roles. Brandon Cooks, of course, can be someone who takes the ball over the top of a defense, can function as an inside-outside wide receiver. Very, very nice. I know he's a little bit smaller, but still offers a very good skill set at that wide receiver position. Then you have Allen Robinson, who's an elite possession wide receiver. I know he hasn't been great this year for Chicago, but let's be honest, Chicago's offense hasn't been great this year. There's probably more to attribute to just having a young quarterback there than anything. Allen Robinson, an elite route runner, can function really well across the middle of the field. Probably the top outside wide receiver available at this point because of his ability to route run, create separation off the line of scrimmage. I think he's very, very good. There's going to be some real market for him. I think that for both Cooks and Allen Robinson, the Baltimore Ravens will probably be interested. You could maybe even consider some of the other teams out in the AFC as well. Maybe the New England Patriots interested in a Brandon Cooks reunion or possibly an Allen Robinson trade to bring in a top wide receiver for Mac Jones. Then we look at Darius Slayton, another outside wide receiver, but more of the physical type where he's going to go high point of football, play outside the numbers. You hit him on back shoulder throws, comeback routes. That's what Darius Slayton's good at. The Giants have made him available as of recent reports. I think he's an intriguing name to watch this trade deadline for sure. Andy Isabella, I think, will for sure get traded this deadline. The Arizona Cardinals just don't have room for him. Of course, they have Christian Kirk, AJ Green, DeAndre Hopkins. You also have Rondale Moore there. So you've got a very nice collection of wide receivers. If you're Arizona, they also have made some moves at that tight end position. So they're very, very set up with pass catchers for Kyler Murray, who's playing like an MVP candidate. Andy Isabella has just been phased out. I think most famously, Andy Isabella is known for being drafted above DK Metcalf. I never understood that when that happened. Just looking at Metcalf's physical frame, his production at Ole Miss, it just didn't make a lot of sense why Isabella went before him. And I think Isabella finally gets moved now. At this point, I think teams that are going to be interested, Jacksonville Jaguars, New York Jets, and some other teams like the Detroit Lions, probably interested in Andy Isabella because they need a younger wide receiver who has some upside. That's Isabella with his speed. It could come in handy for Trevor Lawrence, for Zach Wilson a few weeks down the road when he's back from injury, or Jared Goff, who's just dying in need of wide receiver help there with Tyrell Williams, Quintez Cephas out. The Detroit Lions badly need to bring in some wide receiver at this trade deadline. Then let's turn our attention to the New York Jets. I talked about them as a target destination for Andy Isabella, but I think they're also going to be shopping some of their own wide receivers. Jamison Crowder, who they signed a few years back, 3-year deal. He's on the final year of his deal. Could function as a really nice slot wide receiver for a team. He is a nice security blanket underneath, very good drag, zig route runner, also can function across the middle of the field a little bit. And when Sam Darnold was the starting quarterback for the New York Jets, he utilized Jamison Crowder a ton, partially because Jamison Crowder was really the only wide receiver who could create separation at that time, but also Crowder, I think, just is a very nice third wide receiver for a team. Probably could be acquired for a 6th or 7th round pick. Not very valuable player at this point. So very good low buy option for a team if you're looking for a little bit of depth. Maybe the Minnesota Vikings could consider him. I know KJ Osborne's been playing really good for them as their number 3 wide receiver. However, Jamison Crowder bringing another possession wideout who can help underneath, especially in case you have an injury later into the season. Could be a very good buy low option for the Minnesota Vikings, who do have a ton of picks on day 3. Then looking at Denzel Mims himself, former 2nd round pick, taken only a few picks after Laviska Shenault, and just hasn't gotten on the field a ton this year. Has a very low target share this year with the New York Jets. Isn't getting the ball thrown to him very often when he's on the field. When he has had the ball thrown to him, he's made plays. So he's shown some flashes that he can be a good wide receiver. I also have my skepticism that the Jets do trade Denzel Mims just because this week Corey Davis is out. I don't think that they're trying to absolutely tank and move all these players out of the system. I think Denzel Mims probably doesn't get traded. However, his name will be in trade discussions. One player who I know will for sure get traded or at least released at some point this year is Deshaun Jackson from the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams and Deshaun Jackson mutually agreed to look for a trade partner. That is according to ESPN reports. Deshaun Jackson is going to be available for trade. Has a very, very good historic career of being a deep threat wide receiver and someone who can really make plays after the catch. And he's showing that again this year, averaging over 20 yards per reception. Not quite the volume receiver he used to be back in Philadelphia and in Tampa Bay, but still a very good wide receiver nonetheless. And I think could have a really high functionality for a team that needs a little bit more juice into their offense. Green Bay Packers, they need some speed, especially with Valdez-Scantling out, with Equanimous St. Brown out. Of course, their top 3 wide receivers right now on the COVID list, so Deshaun Jackson could make some sense there. Probably very, very attainable for a very low price. And then also looking at Odell Beckham Jr. Again, another player who I do not think gets traded, but is available on the trade block if teams call Cleveland about him. He just hasn't had the career in Cleveland like I think a lot of people were expecting when he got dealt there. Jarvis Landry's just been the better wide receiver than him since both of them got to Cleveland. Odell Beckham Jr., I think still a very good talent, can push the ball over the field a little bit, functions very well out of the slot. However, just in Cleveland's offense, isn't the most productive player that he could be. I think that it's very likely he could get traded. However, I don't see him getting traded this deadline. I do think he's available, but not going to get dealt. Now we're going to go into a little bit of rapid fire factor cap on some players here, starting with Marlon Mack. I think it's a fact. He gets traded this deadline. The Indianapolis Colts do not have a need for Marlon Mack. 3 teams interested for me: San Francisco 49ers, Los Angeles Chargers, and the Kansas City Chiefs. Those 3 teams, I think, all need another running back into the system. Eckler needs a spell back. The Chiefs could use a real runner of the football, and the 49ers, I think, could use someone who's a little bit more reliable week to week. Of course, they have a collection of players like JaMychal Hasty, Elijah Mitchell, and a few others there as well, specifically with their former draft pick as well there. The 49ers have some nice running backs. However, Marlon Mack, I think, would be the most consistent runner for them as of right now. Trey Sermon was the name I was trying to think of for the 49ers. Excuse me for my mind slip. Then moving on to quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo, staying with the San Francisco 49ers. I think it's capped. Jimmy Garoppolo will be on the 49ers at the end of this season. He will not get traded this week. The New England Patriots were really the only team last year that made sense for a Jimmy Garoppolo trade destination just based off what we've seen. And now with them having Mac Jones, I just don't see any way that they get involved in Jimmy Garoppolo. He will not be traded this deadline. Then we move to the Philadelphia Eagles, where we have edge Derek Barnett and offensive tackle Andre Dillard. I think it's a fact for both of these players. I think that they end up both getting traded. The Jacksonville Jaguars, Baltimore Ravens, and New York Jets are teams that will be interested in both of these players. I think that all three of these teams will have discussions with the Philadelphia Eagles about both of these starting level players. Andre Dillard, just hasn't really established himself in Philadelphia, has had some early injury problems. And Derek Barnett has made some really big plays in his Philadelphia Eagles career, was massive on their run to a Super Bowl win when he was a rookie. And at this point, I just don't see any way that they look to keep Derek Barnett long-term. I think Philadelphia is going to really start to rebuild, make some changes, and I see Derek Barnett and Andre Dillard both getting traded. If I had to guess, Andre Dillard ends up in Jacksonville and Derek Barnett ends up in Baltimore. That would be my estimation. However, very likely that I could even see that flipped where Derek Barnett ends up in Jacksonville and Andre Dillard ends up in Baltimore. The Jets, I think, probably don't acquire either of these players. However, we'll have conversations with the Eagles about both of them. Most likely for me, Jacksonville, Baltimore to get involved for these two players. And then our last one here, Evan Ingram of the New York Giants. I think it's cap that he gets traded. There's been a lot of rumors lately heating up that Evan Ingram could be dealt. I just don't see it. I think Evan Ingram's going to play the rest of the season with the New York Giants. I would be very, very surprised to see him on the move out of New York. I know Dave Gettleman has been aggressive with the trades recently, brought in Kyle Rudolph as well this past offseason. So they've got some players there. However, I think that they're going to keep the athletic tight end. I know he's had issues with his hands in the past. I just don't see a team giving up enough draft capital for Evan Ingram to really motivate the Giants to make a move. This has been my trade candidates discussion. Again, remember to like, subscribe, and comment if you want the Justin Fields jersey. Very, very likely you could get it because we have less than 5,000 subscribers. So, chances are pretty decent compared to some of the other big channels that don't even do jersey giveaways. We really care about you. We want to put you at the front of utility sports. Thanks again so much for watching. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. Let me know in the comment section who I missed talking about, what you think about some of the players I brought up and some of the teams. I think it's going to be an awesome trade deadline, and I'm really excited to see all the moves that do go down. Again, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys in the very next Utility Sports video.